Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the Bible's most jaw-dropping stories, a tale of epic strength, devastating betrayal, and a warning that still gives us pause today. We're talking about Samson, a man set apart by God, a powerhouse who could take on armies with his bare hands, until one fateful choice changed everything. Have you ever wondered how someone so unbelievably strong could be brought down by a single decision? Or how a moment of misplaced trust could unravel a destiny built on divine promise? Stick around, because we're about to break down the story of Samson and the one woman who played a pivotal role in his downfall. And trust me, there's a lot we can learn from his experience about protecting our hearts and keeping our judgment sharp. Before we jump in, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and get ready to explore a story that's as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. Who was Samson? Let's rewind a few thousand years to ancient Israel, a rugged, often brutal land, filled with epic battles and legendary figures. In the midst of this turmoil, God chose a man named Samson. His birth itself was nothing short of miraculous. Born to a woman who had long given up hope, Samson's arrival was a sign of divine intervention. From the very start, his life was meant to be different. Samson was dedicated to God from birth. He was raised under the Nazirite vow, a commitment that went beyond abstaining from alcohol or avoiding unclean things. This vow meant he was set apart in every sense. One of the most famous aspects of his vow was that he was never to cut his hair. That long, unbroken mane wasn't just a style, it was the very source of his supernatural strength. But here's the thing. While Samson's strength was legendary, his story isn't just about muscles and miracles. It's about how even those chosen by God can have deep human vulnerabilities. Samson's incredible physical power was matched only by a heart that could be led astray. And that, my friends, is where the real lesson begins. Life in turbulent times. To really understand Samson, we have to look at the world he lived in. Israel was a land at constant war with the Philistines, and every day was a struggle for survival and identity. In such a harsh environment, being chosen by God wasn't just an honor, it was a heavy responsibility. Samson's feats were nothing short of miraculous. Imagine a man who single-handedly tore apart a lion, who defeated entire armies with the bare strength of his arms, and even used the jawbone of a donkey as a weapon. These stories might sound like legends, but they were a part of everyday life in a world where divine power and human frailty intersected. Yet, for all his prowess, there was one area where Samson was not as invincible: his heart. Despite his physical might, he was prone to making decisions based on emotion rather than wisdom. This vulnerability would prove to be his greatest weakness, and the starting point for a cautionary tale about trust and temptation. The rise of a legend. From his miraculous birth to his extraordinary feats, Samson's early life was marked by divine favor and a destiny of greatness. His parents received a message from God, assuring them that their son would begin the deliverance of Israel from the Philistines. Growing up, Samson was aware that he was set apart, and his actions soon confirmed that he was indeed a force to be reckoned with. As a young man, his strength and boldness quickly became the talk of the land. Whether it was dispatching a raging lion with his bare hands or outsmarting the enemy in battle, every feat added to his legend. But behind these sensational stories was a man who was, at his core, deeply human, capable of both heroic acts and catastrophic mistakes. It wasn't long before that very humanity would lead him into dangerous territory, and it all started with one fateful relationship. Enter Delilah, the woman who changed everything. Let's talk about Delilah, a name that echoes through history as much for its mystery as for the role it played in one of the Bible's most dramatic cautionary tales. When you hear Delilah, you might immediately picture a woman whose allure and charm could bring down even the mightiest of heroes. And that's exactly what happened with Samson. But who was Delilah, really? Was she merely a seductress out to exploit Samson's weaknesses, or was there something more complex at play? Delilah's origins are shrouded in mystery. While the biblical account does not give us a full biography, over the centuries, countless interpretations have painted her as a multifaceted character. Some view her as a cunning operative working for the Philistines, the enemy of Israel, who exploited her feminine wiles as a weapon of espionage. Others argue that she was a woman caught in the tumult of her time, a person driven by her own desires, ambitions, or even survival instincts in a world dominated by power struggles. In either case, one thing is indisputable. Delilah possessed an uncanny ability to understand and manipulate human emotion. In the turbulent world of ancient Israel, where the line between political strategy and personal relationships often blurred, Delilah's actions stand out as a pivotal moment. Here was a woman who, instead of being relegated to the background, took center stage in one of history's most fateful stories. It's important to realize that Delilah wasn't simply a passive bystander in Samson's life. She was an active participant whose choices would alter the course of events. Imagine the position she was in. The Philistines, who had long been at odds with Israel, needed a way to neutralize the threat that was Samson, the man blessed by God with superhuman strength. To them, finding a way to undermine his power was not just a military strategy, it was a necessity for survival. In this light, Delilah's involvement can be seen as part of a larger political and military conflict. Whether she was acting out of loyalty to her people, personal ambition, or simply as a means of survival in a world where women had limited power, her methods were calculated and deliberate. Delilah's approach was deceptively gentle. Rather than resorting to overt force or intimidation, she used charm, conversation, and emotional intimacy as her primary tools. Day after day, she engaged Samson in talks that on the surface seemed filled with affection and genuine curiosity. It was a gradual process, one that slowly chipped away at the walls that Samson had built around his most guarded secret. Her persistence was relentless. She would ask, coax, and sometimes even plead with him to reveal the source of his power, knowing full well that his strength was not just a physical attribute, but a symbol of his covenant with God. There's an irony in the way Delilah operated. While Samson's strength was a gift from God, symbolized by his uncut hair and his commitment to a Nazirite vow, Delilah's power lay in her ability to subvert that gift without the use of physical force. Her strategy wasn't to confront him head-on, but to reach him on an emotional level, a level where defenses tend to drop. It was a slow dance of seduction and persuasion, where every word and every touch was intended to make him feel both desired and vulnerable. Delilah's role in this ancient drama forces us to confront a universal truth, that the most dangerous threats are not always those we see coming in the form of armies or violent adversaries, but often those that come in the guise of a gentle smile, a tender word, or a seemingly caring inquiry. In the case of Samson, the warning was clear. Never let your guard down, no matter how appealing the invitation might be. Delilah's influence over him was not merely a personal failing on his part. It was a demonstration of how subtle and insidious manipulation can be when delivered under the cloak of intimacy. As we consider Delilah's actions, it's worth reflecting on the complexity of human relationships. In every relationship, there exists a delicate balance between trust and skepticism, between giving one's heart away and protecting it fiercely. Delilah understood this balance all too well, and she exploited it. Her methods may seem cold or calculating when viewed through the lens of history, but they also serve as a powerful lesson for us today. They remind us that sometimes the very qualities we cherish, affection, trust, openness, can be turned against us if we are not careful. It's also important to acknowledge that historical narratives often simplify characters into one-dimensional figures. Delilah, in many retellings, is cast purely as a villain, a temptress who seduced Samson solely for the benefit of his enemies. However, modern interpretations suggest that her motivations might have been far more complex. Perhaps she was driven by a need to assert some form of agency in a patriarchal society. Or maybe she was acting out of a sense of duty to her own people. Whatever her reasons, the effect was the same. She became the catalyst for Samson's tragic downfall. In this light, her actions are not merely a personal betrayal, but a poignant reminder of how personal vulnerabilities can be exploited in the grand theater of political and social conflict. Delilah's story, therefore, is not just about one woman's betrayal. It's a window into the nature of human vulnerability, a timeless reminder that our greatest strengths can also be our most dangerous weaknesses. Her interactions with Samson serve as a mirror, reflecting the dangers that lie in trusting too freely, in lowering our defenses in the face of persuasive charm. In a modern context, her story challenges us to examine the relationships in our lives and to consider whether the affections we receive might sometimes be masking ulterior motives. When you think about it, Delilah's role is as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. In a world where personal and professional relationships are often intertwined with subtle power plays, her story stands as a testament to the importance of remaining vigilant. Whether it's in the workplace, in social media interactions, or even in our closest personal relationships, the warning is the same. Do not let your guard down, no matter how irresistible the allure of another person may seem. In the end, Delilah is a symbol of how love, seduction, and trust can sometimes become weapons. Her actions remind us that the path to betrayal is often paved with seemingly benign interactions, with questions that seem harmless, until they lead to revelations that change everything. And for Samson, that change was catastrophic. His encounter with Delilah was not just a moment of personal weakness, it was the turning point of a life that had been filled with promise, power, and divine favor. It's a lesson that resonates through the ages, urging us to look beyond the surface, to question the motives behind every gesture of affection, and to protect our most sacred strengths with unwavering vigilance. The art of seduction and deception. Now that we've examined who Delilah was and the context in which she operated, let's delve into the art of seduction and deception, the very techniques she used to unravel Samson's defenses. This isn't just a story of ancient intrigue. It's a deep exploration into the ways that charm and persuasion can become instruments of control, stripping away even the mightiest of strengths with nothing more than carefully chosen words and subtle gestures. Seduction, at its core, is about influence. It's about drawing someone in, creating an emotional connection, and then leveraging that connection for one's own benefit. For Delilah, the target was clear, the source of Samson's divine strength. But the methods she employed were anything but straightforward. They were a masterclass in the gradual erosion of resistance, a process that relied on patience, persistence, and a keen understanding of human nature. One of the key elements of Delilah's strategy was her ability to engage Samson in conversation that seemed sincere and affectionate. Instead of an aggressive confrontation, she chose a softer, more disarming approach. Every question she asked was designed to make him feel valued, to reinforce the intimacy between them. When you're in the midst of such exchanges, it's easy to let your guard down, to feel that maybe, just maybe, you're finally being seen for who you truly are. And that's exactly what happened with Samson. Delilah's questions were not random or haphazard. They were calculated probes meant to extract the truth bit by bit. With each inquiry, she inched closer to uncovering the secret behind his strength. It wasn't a single dramatic moment of revelation. It was a series of small concessions, each one lowering his defenses a little more. Think of it like chipping away at a fortress wall. With each gentle tap, the wall becomes weaker, until finally, there's a breach through which the enemy can enter. But what makes her approach so effective isn't just the gradual nature of her probing. It's the emotional manipulation that underpins it all. Delilah knew exactly how to play on Samson's insecurities and desires. She complimented him lavishly, making him feel powerful and important. At the same time, she offered a kind of emotional intimacy that he craved, a connection that made him forget, even if only momentarily, about the responsibilities and burdens of being a chosen warrior. In her presence, he could let down the heavy armor of pride and bravado, exposing the tender vulnerabilities that lay beneath. The art of deception, as Delilah practiced it, is as much about timing as it is about technique. It's not enough to simply flatter someone or to ask the right questions. You must also know when to push, when to pull back, and when to let the conversation drift toward more personal territory. Delilah exhibited a remarkable sense of timing. There were moments when she would laugh lightly at his jokes, moments when her eyes would soften with feigned concern, and other times when her tone would shift ever so slightly to convey urgency. All these subtle cues worked together to create an atmosphere in which Samson felt safe, valued, and ultimately compelled to reveal what he had guarded so closely. What's fascinating is how this ancient form of seduction bears a striking resemblance to the tactics we see in modern times, whether in personal relationships, business negotiations, or even political campaigns. The power of persuasion has not diminished over the centuries. It has simply evolved in its methods and mediums. Today, we might see similar strategies on social media, in advertising, or in the carefully crafted narratives of charismatic leaders. The underlying principles remain the same. Build trust, lower defenses, and then, when the moment is right, strike with precision. Delilah's use of seduction and deception also highlights an important truth about human nature, that our most prized secrets often lie hidden behind layers of vulnerability. Samson's strength was not just in his muscles or his divine favor. It was in his unwavering belief in his own invincibility. And it was this very belief that made him susceptible. When someone as confident as Samson allows himself to be seduced into a false sense of security, it becomes all too easy for a skilled deceiver to extract what they want. Delilah was a master at identifying that precise moment when confidence turns into complacency, when a moment of tenderness becomes an opening for betrayal. There's another element at play in the art of seduction that we must consider: the interplay between love and power. In many ways, the dynamic between Samson and Delilah was a struggle for control. Samson, with all his physical might, had always been the dominant force in his battles. But in the realm of emotion and intimacy, power shifts unexpectedly. Delilah exploited this shift, understanding that love and desire can often be used to subvert even the most formidable of characters. It's a lesson that resonates deeply even today. The realization that power is not always about brute strength, but often about the subtle, invisible forces that govern our hearts and minds. For anyone who's ever experienced the intoxicating pull of a relationship that promises both passion and validation, the story of Delilah and Samson is a cautionary tale. It reminds us that the allure of seduction can sometimes come at a steep price, one that might strip away not just our defenses, but also the very essence of what makes us strong. In the end, Delilah's methods were not just about learning a secret. They were about breaking down a fortress built of pride, trust, and divine purpose. It's worth pausing here to consider what this means for us today. While most of us are not in the business of waging wars or possessing supernatural strength, the fundamental dynamics of trust and deception are universal. Whether in our careers, our friendships, or our romantic endeavors, the art of seduction, when misused, can lead to significant personal setbacks. The key takeaway is not to live in constant fear of manipulation, but rather to cultivate a healthy sense of awareness. Recognize that while a warm smile or a kind word might feel comforting, it's always important to ask yourself, what is the motive behind this gesture? Am I being drawn in for genuine connection Or is there an underlying agenda at play? In the story of Delilah, we see how calculated charm can dismantle even the most robust defenses. Her legacy, as troubling as it might be, serves as a powerful reminder. Never allow the allure of temporary affection to override your long-term well-being. The tactics she employed, persistent questioning, emotional flattery, and subtle manipulation, are as effective now as they were then. And if we're not careful, we might find ourselves unwittingly giving away the very secrets that make us unique and strong. Ultimately, the art of seduction and deception is a double-edged sword. In the hands of someone like Delilah, it becomes a weapon that not only extracts secrets, but also shatters lives. Her methods force us to confront the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the people we trust the most may be the ones most capable of causing our downfall. And while it might be tempting to demonize her completely, her story also challenges us to understand the intricate dance between love, power, and betrayal, a dance that continues to play out in countless relationships around the world today. Red flags and warning signs. Even as we marvel at the intricacies of Delilah's seductive tactics, it's crucial to step back and ask, what were the warning signs that Samson, for all his strength, failed to see? In his tragic journey, there are countless moments that, in hindsight, should have served as red flags. Signals that someone was not acting out of pure affection, but with an ulterior motive. This part of the story is perhaps the most valuable lesson for us today, as it delves into the subtle cues and behaviors that can indicate when trust is being misused. One of the most obvious red flags in Samson's story was the relentless nature of Delilah's questioning. Rather than accepting a simple, "I don't know," when asked about the secret of his strength, she pressed on relentlessly. Her questions were never one-off occurrences. They were repeated, persistent, and grew increasingly intimate with each passing day. It wasn't simply curiosity. It was a calculated, almost obsessive effort to pry into the most guarded part of his identity. In modern life, if someone is repeatedly pushing for personal details that you'd rather keep private, it's a sign that they might have a hidden agenda. Another warning sign was the emotional manipulation at work. Delilah was a master at making Samson feel both special and vulnerable. She showered him with compliments, validated his feelings, and created an atmosphere where he felt safe enough to lower his defenses. But beneath this veneer of care was an undercurrent of control. The way she seamlessly shifted from tenderness to insistence revealed that her interest was not merely affectionate, it was strategic. This kind of emotional roller coaster can be incredibly disorienting. In our own lives, when someone makes us feel unusually dependent on their validation, or when we find ourselves giving away secrets that we would normally guard closely, it might be a sign that we're being manipulated. In addition to these behaviors, there was a profound sense of inconsistency in Delilah's actions. Even as Samson's trust grew, there were subtle contradictions in her words and behavior. At times, she would express deep concern for his well-being, only to later pivot back to probing questions about his strength. This inconsistency is a hallmark of deceptive behavior. When a person's actions do not match their words, it's often a sign that something is amiss. For anyone watching their own relationships, noticing these inconsistencies is vital. It's a reminder that genuine care is steady and reliable, while manipulation tends to be erratic and self-serving. Another critical red flag in Samson's narrative was his own complacency, a dangerous combination of overconfidence and emotional vulnerability. Despite the repeated warnings that something was off, Samson continued to let his guard down. Each small concession he made, each piece of personal information he revealed, wasn't an isolated error, but part of a gradual erosion of his defenses. This cumulative effect is perhaps one of the most potent lessons of all, that even seemingly insignificant compromises, when taken together, can lead to irreversible damage. In our modern lives, it's easy to rationalize small breaches of trust, but Samson's experience reminds us that these small moments can add up, eventually leaving us exposed to exploitation. Furthermore, there is the broader lesson of trusting our intuition. Deep down, Samson likely sensed that something was not right. There were moments of hesitation, of inner warning that he ignored in favor of flattery and the desire to be loved. Our instincts are there for a reason. They're our first line of defense against manipulation. Yet in the face of overwhelming emotional pressure, it can be all too easy to silence that inner voice. The tragedy of Samson's downfall lies not only in the betrayal itself, but in the failure to heed the subtle signals of his heart. In today's fast-paced world, where information overload and constant interaction can dull our senses, learning to trust that gut feeling is more important than ever. Let's also consider the nature of boundaries, or the lack thereof. One of the most critical red flags in any relationship is the erosion of personal boundaries. Samson had been given a divine gift, and with it came the responsibility to protect it. But Delilah, through her persistent probing and charm, systematically dismantled those boundaries. In our own experiences, clear personal boundaries are essential. Whether in our friendships, romantic relationships, or professional dealings, boundaries serve as the first line of defense against those who would take advantage of us. When someone repeatedly pushes past those boundaries, it's a signal that their intentions may not be as pure as they seem. Finally, the story of Samson and Delilah underscores a timeless truth, that sometimes the very qualities that make us strong can also be our greatest vulnerabilities. Samson's divine strength was matched by his human need for connection and validation. It was precisely this need that made him susceptible to Delilah's charms. In our own lives, it's crucial to balance our strengths with an awareness of our vulnerabilities. No matter how self-assured we may feel, there is always room for caution. The ability to recognize and address our own weaknesses is not a sign of failure, but a mark of true wisdom. Reflecting on all these red flags, the relentless questioning, the emotional manipulation, the inconsistencies, the gradual erosion of boundaries, and the neglect of our inner warning systems, there's a clear, resonant message for us today. Whether we're navigating personal relationships, professional environments, or even our online interactions, these lessons are invaluable. Trust should never be given freely. It must be earned and maintained with vigilance. The cautionary tale of Samson reminds us that ignoring these warning signs, even in small doses, can lead to outcomes that are both painful and irreversible. So as you go about your day, take a moment to reflect on your own relationships. Ask yourself if there have been moments when you ignored a gut feeling or allowed someone to overstep your boundaries. Consider the ways in which small compromises might be affecting your well-being. And most importantly, remember that it's never too late to start listening to those inner signals. Building awareness and maintaining healthy boundaries isn't about closing yourself off from the world. It's about protecting the very things that make you unique and strong. In a world filled with charm and allure, where the art of persuasion is as potent as ever, let Samson's experience be a reminder to always be on guard. The same tactics that were used to break down his defenses can be found in many forms today, whether in personal relationships, business dealings, or even in the carefully curated personas we encounter on social media. It's a universal lesson. Never let your guard down completely, and always be willing to question the motives behind even the most flattering of compliments. In the end, the red flags in Samson's story serve not only as warnings, but as opportunities for growth. They teach us that true strength lies not just in what we can do or achieve, but in our ability to protect our inner selves from those who would seek to exploit our vulnerabilities. They remind us that every moment of trust, every act of openness, must be balanced with caution and awareness. By learning from Samson's mistakes, by recognizing the signs of manipulation, and by setting firm boundaries, we can build relationships that are healthier, more genuine, and ultimately more rewarding. In a society that often equates vulnerability with weakness, let us remember that true wisdom is knowing when to trust and when to hold back, when to open our hearts, and when to safeguard them. As we conclude this section on red flags and warning signs, remember that the story of Samson and Delilah is not merely an ancient tale of betrayal and downfall. It is a mirror reflecting the challenges we all face when it comes to trust, vulnerability, and the ever-present risk of manipulation. By remaining vigilant, by listening to our inner voices, and by holding firm to our personal boundaries, we can protect ourselves from the subtle, insidious forces that seek to undermine our true strength. Let Samson's tragic experience be a guide that urges us to cherish and safeguard our inner power, to be cautious with our affections, and to never ignore those small, persistent red flags that might otherwise lead us down a path of regret. In doing so, we honor not only the lessons of the past, but also the promise of a future where our relationships are built on mutual respect, honesty, and unwavering strength. The downward spiral. By the time Samson had given up his secret, it was too late. Each small lapse in judgment had chipped away at the very foundation of his strength. What began as a series of seemingly innocent conversations ended in betrayal. The cumulative effect of those decisions led to a catastrophic chain reaction. Once Samson's secret was known, his enemies moved swiftly. The Philistines, who had long been waiting for an opportunity to strike, seized the moment. They overpowered him, cutting his hair while he slept, a symbolic act that stripped him of his divine strength. In that instant, the mighty Samson was reduced from a hero to a prisoner. This was not just a physical defeat. Samson's identity, his destiny, and his relationship with God were all shattered in a single devastating moment. The loss of his strength was accompanied by a deep sense of betrayal, both from the person he loved and from the very ideals he had once embodied. His story, once filled with promise and potential, had turned into a tragic, cautionary tale. The final act of defiance. Even in the midst of despair, Samson's story isn't entirely one of regret. In his final moments, when all seemed lost, he found a way to reclaim a measure of his former strength. Captured, humiliated, and forced to labor as a slave, Samson was a broken man. Yet, in a last, desperate act of defiance, he turned to God and prayed for one final burst of strength. It was in that moment, when his hair had begun to grow back and the divine favor was once again within reach, that Samson made his final stand. With a mighty cry, he pushed against the pillars of the Philistine temple, toppling them and taking down his enemies along with him. This act of self-sacrifice wasn't just about revenge. It was a poignant reminder that even in our darkest moments, there's a chance for redemption if we cling to what truly matters. Samson's final act serves as a stark illustration of the consequences of misplaced trust and the cost of ignoring the warning signs. His life, a mixture of extraordinary strength and heartbreaking vulnerability, teaches us that true power lies not just in physical might, but in the wisdom to protect ourselves from the subtle traps of deception. Modern parallels, lessons for today. So why does a story that happened thousands of years ago still matter to us? The answer is simple. The human heart hasn't changed much over time. The dynamics of trust, deception, and vulnerability that played out in Samson's life are still alive today. In our relationships, our business deals, and even in the way we navigate social media. In our modern world, charm and persuasion are everywhere. Think about those times when someone showers you with compliments or seems overly interested in your personal life. While not every act of kindness is a trap, it's important to be aware of the tactics that can lead to manipulation. The warning from Samson's story is clear. Be cautious when someone seems too eager to know your deepest secrets, because sometimes that eagerness is not born out of genuine care, but from a desire to control and profit from your vulnerabilities. Consider relationships where one partner constantly shifts between being overly affectionate and suddenly distant or critical. This inconsistency can be a red flag, much like the signs Samson ignored. It's a reminder that trust should be built slowly and based on actions rather than just words. Even in the world of business, the dynamics are similar. If a colleague or partner seems too willing to share every detail of their strategy, or worse, tries to pry into your own, take a step back. Ask yourself if their intentions are really as pure as they seem. The lesson here is to remain vigilant and always trust your gut when something feels off. The power of discernment. At the heart of Samson's story is a message about the importance of discernment, of knowing when to trust and when to hold back. It isn't enough to rely solely on our physical strength or even our emotional instincts. True wisdom comes from understanding our own vulnerabilities and being willing to protect them. We've all experienced moments where we ignored our inner warnings because we wanted to believe in the best of someone or something. Samson's repeated lapses serve as a powerful reminder that no matter how strong we are, even a single crack in our armor can have devastating consequences. The challenge then is to learn from these mistakes and to build up our ability to recognize when something isn't right. For many of us, this means developing a strong sense of self-awareness. It means being honest about our weaknesses and setting clear boundaries to protect ourselves. And while it might be tempting to believe that we're invincible, the story of Samson teaches us that true strength is knowing when to listen to that inner voice, when to step back and reassess, rather than charging ahead blindly. Even if you're not particularly religious, the underlying principle is universal. Whether it's in our personal lives or our professional endeavors, seeking advice from trusted sources and being open to constructive criticism can help us avoid pitfalls that come from overconfidence and misplaced trust. Embracing healthy relationships. Ultimately, the lessons we learn from Samson aren't just about avoiding betrayal. They're about building relationships that are rooted in honesty, respect, and mutual support. It's about understanding that trust is earned over time, and that even the most seductive charm can be a mask for ulterior motives. Ask yourself, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you ignored red flags because you were so taken in by someone's words? Maybe it was a friendship, a romantic relationship, or even a business deal that promised too much and delivered too little. These experiences, while painful, can serve as valuable lessons. They remind us to value long-term well-being over short-term gratification, and to always keep our eyes open for signs of manipulation. In a world where superficial connections are often prioritized, taking the time to nurture genuine relationships becomes even more important. Healthy relationships, whether with family, friends, or partners, are built on the foundation of clear communication, respect, and a willingness to support each other's growth. When we cultivate these qualities, we're better able to protect ourselves from those who might use charm and flattery to gain control over us. Applying Samson's warning in our lives. Now let's bring this home and talk about what you can do with these lessons today. Reflecting on Samson's story isn't just about lamenting his mistakes, it's about taking action to protect ourselves in our own lives. First, it starts with setting clear boundaries. Know what you're willing to share and what you want to keep private. Whether it's personal details, emotional vulnerabilities, or professional secrets, having firm boundaries helps you stay in control of your own narrative. Second, listen to that inner voice. If something feels off, don't dismiss it, even if you're drawn in by someone's charm or persuasive words. Trust that gut feeling. Often, it's trying to tell you something important. Third, don't be afraid to seek outside opinions. Sometimes it's hard to see the red flags when you're caught up in the moment. Talk to a friend, a mentor, or someone you trust. Getting a second perspective can save you from making decisions you might later regret. Fourth, build emotional resilience. Understand your own triggers and work on strategies to stay grounded when emotions run high. This isn't about being cynical or closed off. It's about being smart and proactive in protecting your heart and mind. And finally, always prioritize long-term well-being over short bursts of excitement. Whether you're dealing with personal relationships or professional partnerships, take the time to evaluate whether what seems appealing today will truly serve you in the future. By applying these principles, you can create a life that's built on healthy, trusting relationships while avoiding the pitfalls that befell even a hero like Samson. Reflections on strength and vulnerability. There's an important balance between strength and vulnerability that Samson's life exemplifies. His story shows us that even the mightiest can have a soft spot, a place where their guard drops and the risks of betrayal loom large. But it's also a lesson in redemption. Despite his catastrophic mistakes, Samson's final act of defiance was a testament to the power of acknowledging one's errors and fighting back even when the odds are stacked against you. This duality, being strong yet vulnerable, is something we all navigate in our lives. It's okay to let your guard down sometimes, but it's crucial to know when to hold on tight. And when you do make mistakes, as we all inevitably will, it's important to learn from them and build a resilience that helps you move forward. Remember, true strength isn't about being invincible. It's about knowing your limits, understanding your weaknesses, and making conscious choices to protect what matters most. Final thoughts and takeaways. Before we wrap up, let's recap the key lessons from Samson's story. We learned that great strength comes with great vulnerability. Even a man chosen by God can be undone by his own weaknesses. Charm and seduction can mask hidden agendas. Delilah's persistent probing and emotional manipulation show us that not every friendly gesture is genuine. Ignoring red flags can lead to irreversible consequences. Each small decision that led Samson to reveal his secret was a step toward his downfall. True discernment comes from self-awareness and trust in one's intuition. Listening to your gut and setting clear boundaries are essential to avoiding traps. Healthy relationships require honesty, respect, and mutual support. Building long-term trust is a process, not an overnight miracle. Samson's story isn't just an ancient tale, it's a mirror reflecting the challenges we face in modern life. Whether it's in our personal relationships, our careers, or our interactions online, the timeless lesson is the same. Always protect your inner strength by staying alert to the signs of manipulation and never letting your guard down when it comes to trust. Final thoughts and takeaways. As we near the end of our journey through Samson's dramatic tale, it's time to pause and reflect on the powerful lessons that echo through this ancient story. Samson's life was a tapestry woven from threads of incredible strength, divine favor, and ultimately, heartbreaking vulnerability. His journey, from his miraculous birth to his awe-inspiring feats, and finally his tragic downfall, serves as a timeless reminder that no matter how mighty we may appear, every one of us carries within the potential for both greatness and weakness. One of the most striking lessons we learn from Samson is that great power comes with an inherent vulnerability. Samson was chosen by God for a purpose. His strength was not merely a physical attribute, but a divine gift meant to deliver his people from oppression. Yet, even with such an extraordinary endowment, he was not immune to the frailties of the human heart. His story teaches us that when our vulnerabilities are ignored or left unchecked, they can become the very instruments of our undoing. Consider for a moment the delicate balance between trust and caution. Samson's downfall wasn't the result of a single, isolated misstep. It was the cumulative effect of a series of decisions, each one a small compromise of his inner defenses. When he began to let his guard down in the presence of Delilah, it wasn't as though he suddenly became weak overnight. Instead, each seemingly minor moment of trust allowed his adversary to chip away at the foundations of his strength. This gradual erosion is a lesson for all of us. Even the smallest red flags, if repeatedly ignored, can lead to outcomes that are difficult or even impossible to reverse. In reflecting on Samson's fate, we are reminded that true strength is not solely measured by our ability to overcome external obstacles, but by our capacity to protect our inner selves. His story underscores the importance of self-awareness, the necessity of knowing our own weaknesses as well as our strengths. When we become aware of our vulnerabilities, we can take steps to fortify ourselves against potential exploitation. Samson's failure was not in possessing strength, but in neglecting the quiet warnings of his own heart. He chose to ignore those subtle signals until they culminated in a downfall that cost him everything. Another key takeaway from this story is the danger of misplaced trust. Trust is a powerful and precious commodity. It builds bonds and fosters connections that are vital for our growth and happiness. However, trust must be given judiciously. Samson's experience shows us that not everyone who appears friendly or affectionate has our best interests at heart. When we allow charm and persuasive words to cloud our judgment, we risk opening ourselves up to manipulation. Delilah's relentless probing and her calculated seduction were not mere acts of personal interest. They were part of a broader scheme designed to exploit Samson's greatest asset. This should serve as a caution to us all. While it's important to be open and connected with those around us, we must also remain vigilant and discerning. Reflect on the importance of boundaries in our own lives. Samson's story reminds us that our personal boundaries, whether they relate to emotional intimacy, personal secrets, or our core beliefs, are not meant to be breached lightly. Each time we let someone in without due caution, we expose ourselves to the risk of betrayal. In today's world, where interactions can be fleeting and superficial, maintaining clear boundaries is more crucial than ever. Our relationships, whether personal or professional, should be built on mutual respect and understanding, and not on unchecked trust that can lead to unforeseen vulnerabilities. Moreover, Samson's tale is a poignant illustration of the dual nature of our humanity. It shows us that even those endowed with extraordinary gifts are still subject to the universal struggles of the human condition. His superhuman strength was matched by a human need for love, acceptance, and validation. It was precisely this need that Delilah exploited, turning his deepest desires into the very tools of his downfall. We, too, have parts of ourselves that crave recognition and understanding. Recognizing these aspects of our personality is not a weakness in itself. Rather, it is an invitation to be more mindful about how we share our inner world with others. True wisdom lies in balancing openness with caution, in sharing our vulnerabilities without compromising our well-being. It's also worth considering the broader societal implications of Samson's story. His narrative is not simply a personal tragedy, it is also a commentary on the dangers inherent in systems of power and influence. Samson was caught in a web of political, cultural, and personal forces that ultimately led to his undoing. His life reminds us that even when we are celebrated as heroes, the forces around us, be they societal pressures, manipulative individuals, or simply the passage of time, can conspire to erode what we hold dear. In our modern lives, we may not face literal armies or ancient enemies, but we do encounter situations where external pressures challenge our inner strength. Whether it's in our workplaces, our communities, or even on social media, the lessons of Samson urge us to remain true to our core values and to resist the lure of easy gratification that comes at too high a cost. As we digest these lessons, it becomes clear that the legacy of Samson is not one of unmitigated despair, but rather one of hard-earned wisdom. His life, in all its triumphs and failures, serves as a mirror reflecting the complexities of our own existence. It teaches us that while it's important to celebrate our strengths, we must also honor and protect our vulnerabilities. In the end, the true measure of a person is not simply in the battles they win, but in the wisdom they gain from the losses they endure. So as we close this chapter of reflection, Take with you the understanding that every decision you make, every moment of trust, every instance of vulnerability, is an opportunity to either strengthen or undermine your inner fortitude. Samson's story is a timeless call to vigilance, a reminder that the power to shape our destiny lies not only in our abilities, but in our wisdom to safeguard our hearts and minds. Let his legacy inspire you to cultivate a balanced approach to trust and to build relationships that honor both your strengths and your inherent need for protection. A personal invitation to reflect. Now I want to invite you to take a moment for some personal reflection, because while Samson's story is ancient, its lessons are intensely personal and relevant to every one of us. Think back to a time when you let your guard down. Perhaps it was in a moment of excitement, when everything seemed perfect, or maybe it was a time when you ignored a nagging feeling because you wanted to believe the best about someone. We all have Delilah moments in our lives, those instances when our desire for connection and validation leads us to share more than we should or trust too readily. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where, in hindsight, you realized that someone had been asking for more than you were willing to give? It might have been a friend who wanted to know every detail about your personal life, a partner who seemed overly interested in every aspect of your past, or even a colleague who was too eager to learn your secrets. At the time, you might have felt flattered or even relieved to have someone take such an interest in you. But later, you might have wondered if that interest was genuine or if it was just a guise for something more manipulative. I encourage you to pause and ask yourself, when was the last time you trusted someone with your most personal information? What were the circumstances? Did that trust yield positive results, or did it leave you feeling exposed or betrayed? It's not always easy to examine these moments, especially when they come wrapped in the comfort of intimacy and care, but it's precisely by looking back at these experiences that we can learn to better guard our hearts. Consider the red flags that Samson ignored. They were often subtle, a persistent question here, a too friendly compliment there. Sometimes we might dismiss these signals as minor details, not realizing that they are the early indicators of something more significant. I want you to think about whether you've ever encountered situations where someone's actions didn't quite match their words. Perhaps you felt that occasional flicker of doubt, that inner whisper, urging you to be cautious. How did you respond? Did you listen to that inner voice, or did you push it aside in favor of immediate gratification? This reflection isn't meant to make you feel guilty or overly cautious, but rather to empower you with awareness. Every one of us is on a lifelong journey of learning how to balance openness with self-protection. It's natural to want to be open and to share our lives with others. After all, human connection is one of the most beautiful parts of our existence. But it's equally important to recognize that not everyone has our best interests at heart. Just as Samson's vulnerability became the gateway to his downfall, our own vulnerabilities, if left unguarded, can leave us exposed to hurt and betrayal. Think about a relationship, any relationship, that might have taught you a valuable lesson about trust. Maybe it was a friendship where you shared something deeply personal, only to later learn that the person had used that information against you. Or perhaps it was a romantic relationship where the initial charm and attention eventually gave way to behavior that made you question the sincerity of their affection. These experiences, however painful, carry lessons that are worth pondering. They remind us that trust must be built slowly and carefully, layer by layer, and that it's always okay to take a step back when something doesn't feel right. I also invite you to reflect on the idea of personal boundaries. In our busy lives, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new connection and forget to ask ourselves, what am I willing to share? Where do I draw the line between intimacy and oversharing? Establishing and maintaining clear boundaries isn't about shutting people out. It's about creating a safe space where trust can grow organically. Boundaries are the framework that protect our most cherished qualities. ensuring that we don't give away parts of ourselves that we might later regret. In this moment of reflection, consider writing down a few thoughts about your own experiences with trust. What were the moments when you felt truly safe and supported? And what were the times when you felt vulnerable or taken advantage of? Reflecting on these questions can help you identify patterns in your relationships. Perhaps you'll notice that you tend to open up too quickly in certain settings, or maybe you've learned to recognize when someone's interest is too intense. Whatever your insights, know that these reflections are the first step toward building healthier relationships in the future. It's also important to remember that learning from our past is a sign of strength, not weakness. Samson's tragic error was not that he loved too deeply or trusted too openly. It was that he ignored the warning signs that could have protected him. We all have moments where our hearts guide us toward connection, even when our heads tell us to be cautious. There is a delicate balance between following our hearts and listening to our intuition, and finding that balance is a lifelong process. As you take these moments to reflect, I encourage you to consider what you might do differently in the future. Perhaps it means being more selective about who you let into your inner circle. Maybe it involves setting firmer boundaries or learning to say no when something doesn't feel right. Every decision you make to protect your well-being is a step toward a stronger, more resilient you. Remember, it's perfectly natural to want to share your life with others. Human connection is vital to our growth and happiness. But the key is to build that connection on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and genuine care. Qualities that are nurtured slowly and carefully over time. By reflecting on your own experiences and learning from the cautionary tale of Samson, you can empower yourself to make choices that honor both your desire for connection and your need for self-protection. So take a moment now, whether in silence or by jotting down your thoughts, and consider your own Delilah moments. What did you learn from them? How have they shaped the way you approach relationships today? These reflections are not just memories of past mistakes. They are guideposts for a future where your inner strength is protected and your trust is well placed. Moving forward with wisdom. Now that we've taken the time to reflect on our past experiences and the lessons from Samson's story, let's talk about how to move forward with wisdom. The journey toward a more discerning, resilient, and self-aware life is ongoing, and while the challenges of trust and vulnerability are universal, there are concrete steps you can take to build a future that honors your inner strength. The first step in moving forward is to cultivate a mindset of proactive self-care. This means regularly checking in with yourself, both emotionally and mentally, to assess your boundaries, your needs, and your responses to the people and situations around you. One practical way to do this is by setting aside time each day for introspection. Whether it's through journaling, meditation, or simply a quiet moment of reflection, giving yourself space to process your feelings can help you identify when you're at risk of overextending your trust. Over time, this practice builds a deeper awareness of your personal limits and enables you to act on your intuition more confidently. Another essential component is learning to say no, gently but firmly, when something doesn't feel right. It might sound simple, but saying no is often one of the hardest things to do, especially when you fear disappointing someone or missing out on an opportunity for connection. However, every time you say no to something that threatens your well-being, you affirm your commitment to self-respect and personal integrity. It's not about shutting people out. It's about ensuring that your energy and trust are reserved for relationships that truly honor your worth. Practice makes perfect, and over time, you'll find that asserting your boundaries becomes a natural part of who you are. Building a network of support is equally important. No one is an island, and while learning to trust your gut is critical, it's also valuable to have a trusted circle of friends, mentors, or advisors who can offer objective perspectives. These people can serve as sounding boards when you're uncertain about a situation or need reassurance that your instincts are on point. Sharing your experiences, and discussing your challenges with a trusted group not only reinforces your understanding, but also creates a community where healthy relationships are nurtured. The wisdom of others can sometimes shine a light on patterns you might not see on your own. In addition, it helps to invest time in personal growth. Consider pursuing activities or learning experiences that challenge you to step outside your comfort zone. Whether it's a course on emotional intelligence, a workshop on effective communication, or simply reading more about personal development, each step you take to enhance your self-awareness adds another layer to your inner strength. Remember, wisdom is not a destination, but a journey. One that is continually enriched by new insights, experiences, and connections. It's also crucial to integrate the lessons of ancient stories like Samson's into our modern context. While the specifics of his tale are rooted in a time long past, the principles it illustrates are timeless. His life reminds us that our strengths can be undermined by our vulnerabilities if we do not remain vigilant. In today's world, where distractions and superficial interactions are rampant, applying these lessons means being more selective about where you invest your trust and energy. It means seeking out relationships that are built on mutual respect rather than fleeting charm or empty promises. Moving forward with wisdom also means being willing to adapt and learn from every experience, both the successes and the failures. Every time you encounter a challenge in your relationships, view it as an opportunity for growth. Ask yourself what that situation taught you about yourself and how you might handle similar circumstances in the future. This reflective process turns even the most difficult moments into stepping stones toward a more resilient self. Over time, you'll develop a sharper intuition and a more confident approach to making decisions that honor both your heart and your mind. One powerful way to ensure that you're continuously growing in wisdom is to set intentional goals related to your personal development. For example, you might commit to reading a certain number of books on emotional intelligence each year, or to attending workshops that focus on building healthy relationships. You might even set aside regular time to evaluate your relationships, both personal and professional, and determine whether they align with your values and support your overall well-being. These intentional practices help create a framework for living that is both proactive and reflective. Furthermore, consider the role of forgiveness in moving forward. We all make mistakes, and sometimes the process of healing involves forgiving ourselves for the times we let our guard down or trusted too freely. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the lessons learned. Rather, it means accepting that every experience, even the painful ones, is part of our journey toward a stronger, wiser self. By forgiving ourselves, we free up emotional energy to focus on growth rather than regret. It's a liberating step that allows us to move forward without the burden of past missteps weighing us down. Finally, as you continue on your path, remember that the journey toward wisdom is uniquely personal. There is no one-size-fits-all formula, and what works for one person may not work for another. Embrace your individuality and trust that your experiences, reflections, and the choices you make are leading you toward a future where your inner strength is respected and protected. Let the cautionary tale of Samson be a beacon that guides you in moments of doubt, and let your own insights serve as the foundation for a life built on trust, resilience, and genuine connection. In closing, I want to leave you with this thought. Every step you take to protect your heart and honor your true self is a victory in its own right. Whether you're navigating new relationships, overcoming past disappointments, or simply striving to be more mindful in your daily interactions, know that the journey toward wisdom is both challenging and rewarding. With every lesson learned and every boundary reinforced, you are crafting a life that is resilient, authentic, and deeply rooted in self-respect. These final thoughts, this invitation for reflection, and the strategies for moving forward with wisdom are not just abstract ideas. They are practical tools you can start using today to build a future where your trust is well placed and your inner strength remains unassailable. Let Samson's story remind you that while vulnerability is a natural part of being human, it is through awareness, self-care, and a commitment to growth that we transform our weaknesses into lasting strength. Thank you for taking the time to reflect on these insights. May they inspire you to trust wisely, protect fiercely, and always seek the deeper truths in every relationship you nurture. May you always be blessed with the wisdom to recognize the truth, the strength to protect your heart, and the courage to build relationships based on honesty and respect. Remember that every experience, even the painful ones, is a stepping stone to becoming wiser and more resilient. Stay strong, be discerning, and keep growing, today and every day.